and welcome to AI and Sustainability, where we dive into the world of artificial intelligence and explore how it's shaping the future of sustainability. I'm Nafisa, and in this podcast, we'll be unpacking the ways AI is influencing our lives and the planet. If you're curious about how these innovations are making an impact, you are in the right place. Each episode, we tackle thought-provoking questions to get you thinking. Today, we're taking on a big one. Are AI systems inherently biased? Joining us is Professor Tshilidzi Marwala, the Rector of the United Nations University, who will help us unpack algorithmic bias. We'll be discussing how biases can creep into AI, whether we can avoid them, and what it means for fairness and accuracy. So stick around as we dig into these critical questions. And maybe by the end of it, we'll have a little less bias in how we think about AI too. So today we're joined by a very special guest, Professor Marwala, Rector of the United Nations University, Under Secretary General of the United Nations. With years of experience in AI, Professor Marwala is here to shed light on one of the most pressing challenges in the field, bias in AI systems. So welcome, Professor Marwala.
Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
But before we dive too deep, let's unpack the concept of AI bias. So can you break it down to us, bias in AI?
Well, bias in AI is when AI favors, sometimes unfairly, one group of people over another. Or it might just mean that it is able to do one task better than another, and it is desirable that it does both tasks well. So now, what is the evolution of this bias? I think you can actually break it down into two parts. You have bias that emanates from the data that you use to train the AI system. And you have the bias that emanates from the way you train these AI systems, the way the AI systems learn from data. And these two sources of bias actually can be classified into another two parts. Can it be avoided, or is it unavoidable?
How can we eliminate avoidable bias?
Well, avoidable bias, you just use a best practice. If you are going to collect data that you're going to use to train an AI system, you have to ensure that when you sample your data, you sample it fairly, which basically means you don't leave communities that you could otherwise have collected data from. So you can be able to avoid this type of data. The other type of data that you cannot be able to avoid is, for example, if you are going to train a large language model. And one such language is Venda, which is my own language. Another one is English. It just turns out that you have far more data that are in English on the internet than data that are from my language Venda. It means that the large language models of Chivenda, my language, are not going to be as good as the models that you're going to generate from English. And therefore, that bias you can't eliminate, because the way you eliminate it is to ensure that you have as much data on the internet in Chivenda, which is only spoken by 2 million people, compared to English, which is spoken maybe not necessarily as the first language by over 2 billion people. That is an example of unavoidable bias.
In your writing, actually, you also mentioned the concept of fake data. Training models on fake data that's generated by AI, sort of. What are the implications of that?
I would not necessarily call it fake data. I would call it synthetic data. It's not the real thing, because it's always desirable to go and measure the data. And of course, you do have situations where you can augment certain classes of data that are not occurring in abundance in the database, so that at least you can eliminate some of these biases.
So there are contexts where synthetic data is useful. It's just a matter of knowing where to use it and where not to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are instances where it is even desirable to use synthetic data, especially when you are dealing with the privacy of people. I'll give you an example. In medical schools, long time ago, the books that were used in medical schools would actually be of human models. And normally, because in anatomy, some of those models will have to be naked, they will cover their faces because of privacy issues. Now you can be able to create a realistic data where you don't have to cover people's faces. They are not real people, so that is an example of where you can be able to use synthetic data to be able to protect people's privacy.
And I think you mentioned in your previous writings the fact that if data is trained, for example, for one gender more than the other, very serious implications.
Of course, if you are going to have more data on diseases that target men than data that you have for diseases that target women, it is clear that the algorithms that you're going to generate will favor men over women. And of course, when you sample and you train these systems to be able to make this diagnosis, you have to make sure that you have equal representation of men and women, equal representation of all people from all ages. But I also wanted to talk about another type of bias. This is the bias that emanates from the algorithms, because we have talked quite a great deal about bias that emanates from data. The AI system is trained using the so-called the maximum likelihood approach. The maximum likelihood approach basically means that the AI system works very well with information that are more represented in the data than information that is not represented in the data, because you train it using maximum likelihood approach. And one way you can do it is that you can always have a human doctor. If you are dealing with AI on patients, you need to have a doctor to be able to do that maximum likelihood trained AI system would not actually be able to do. We call that human in the loop. But there will still be cases that you simply cannot deal with. The way we should handle it should be very similar to the way we handle medications. Medications work differently for different people, even within the same community. And the way medical fraternity deals with this issue, they usually disclose the limitations of their medication. They even have a word for it, side effects.
Yeah.
The side effects normally uses the English word may, because it's not definite. They don't know whether it will work or it won't work for you. You may become dizzy. You have been informed. So when you go and buy these medicines, you cannot complain because you are buying knowing very well about its limitation. But it just turns out that many of us don't even go and read those side effects. And some people will say, maybe you don't have a choice, but it is always important to read those side effects.
So you're saying for AI technologies, we should have a list of potential symptoms or potential problems with.
And of course, absolutely. We should disclose all the limitations of AI systems because people are going to use these AI systems for applications which might have existential consequences. So they need to be given the information in its totality. As we standardized and we govern this technology, we can actually prescribe how certain data are actually collected. We can start developing protocols on how data is going to be collected. And the idea of protocols, again, if I go to the medical fraternity, we know about the control experiment. If you have a medication, you normally put it into a test.
Oh, so the population that doesn't take medication?
Yeah, population that takes medication. And they are able to estimate the effectiveness of the medicines that you are giving. And I think this is very important because sometimes we think all these things are definite. They are not. What it does, if I were to use a bombastic words, you are trying to estimate the counterfactual. You are trying to estimate how effective it will be for people who would have been denied that medication compared to the people who have been given that medication. It's all approximation. The idea that you're actually supposed to do is to give someone the medication and deny that medication at the same time, which is physically impossible. So you normally go to a population that is as identical to the one that you're giving the medication as possible so that you can be able to estimate what will happen if you give something to an individual or if you don't give that medication to the same individual.
I'm happy that you mentioned that we it needs to be sort of every human's right to look into the behind the scenes of how AI models are trained, or how the data is collected, what kind of data it is. Because I think an average person has this sort of idea that AI systems are these things that have limitless potential and do not have any limitations. And now we're learning that the more conversations we have around what limitations AI systems have, we actually understand the role of humans, and that AI systems are only useful insofar as humans can find them useful, right, in their work.
Well, I think this is something that has concerned me quite a while. Because I was concerned, because I was having a perception that people think AI is a high precision technology. It is not a high precision technology. It is a statistical technology. In fact, I always give this example to explain that it is not high precision technology. If you compare it to nuclear technology, the tolerance for errors are very, very, very low. So you have to get the physics right, and you have to get the physics precise, because a small error is actually quite catastrophic. Then you come to AI system. The way you train an AI system, you divide your database into three parts: the training data, the model selection data, and the test data. Now, if you come to any AI expert and you said, I actually got 100% in my test data, everybody will tell you, go away, because it's not possible. In fact, if you get that, they will tell you that your model is overtrained. Because it is overtrained, it is not thinking, it is remembering. Now, if it is remembering, it means for cases that it has not seen, it will perform very, very badly. I think this is very, very important. It's not a memory. It is supposed to be intelligent so that it can be able to extrapolate on cases which it has not seen. We call that thinking.
This is a very interesting paradigm, and I personally actually hearing it for the first time, the whole thinking versus memorizing in AI systems. Coming back to the human element, right? Because we talked about data, we talked about machine learning, deep learning, things like that. But to emphasize the role of people who collect data, analyze it, what role does diversity in teams working on AI systems play?
It's absolutely very, very important. It's absolutely very, very important that because it will give you a better view of the nature of your data space, might actually even give you a better view of what tools you're going to measure, to use to collect the data. We all know that the framing problem is very important. If it is data that you're going to interview people, how you answer the question, who is asking the question, how you ask the question is just as important. Because the answer that you're going to get sometimes depends on who asked the question and how the question was asked.
Different people from different walks of life bring their respective perceptions, interpretations. And I have your quote here from your new book, and one of your chapters suggests a framework for embedding ethical considerations into AI development. And it's a very interesting overlap, ethics and technology, right? Do you think that the data part that you mentioned, collecting enough data, correct data, and doing it in a good way will help with the framework, with the ethical?
No, absolutely, because you can have good data, but you have forced people to reveal the data. That's not ethical. And you can even be able to build better models. And we are not going to name any country that collects data from its citizens without their consent. I fundamentally believe that if you are going to collect data from people, there has to be informed consent. And the other issue that I think touches on ethics is this whole concept of truth. It's unfortunate that many AI books, they don't use the word truth. They use the word accuracy. And accuracy is not truth. And of course, truth is a much more complicated issue for AI. AI operates, if I were to use a mathematical term, in continuous space. Continuous means the answer can be 1, it can be 1.1, it can be 1.111, it can be 1.3, So any number can actually exist. But truth is not continuous. Truth is discrete. You are either truthful or not. That is what we call binary. Now, if it is binary and you are using models, the first assumption is that you are dealing with a continuous function. And once you get the answer, you say, how do I turn this continuous number into discrete? And then you will say, if the answer is less than 0.5, I will assume it is 0. If the answer is greater than 0.5, I will assume it's 1. 1 meaning true, 0 meaning false. So you are now basically hand weaving a continuous number into a discrete number, and you lose something there. Not long ago, I went to one of these generative AI. My grandmother's name is Wochianeo. So I went and asked, what is the relationship between Tshilidzi Marwala and Wochianeo? Then it lies with a straight face, obviously. Says, no, Tshilidzi Marwala is actually the wife of Tshilidzi Marwala. How does an AI system think that my grandmother is my wife? Is being unethical.
Well, and that's the maximum probability bias.
Maximum likelihood approach.
Right. We have extensively covered, I think, in the amount of time that we have, the limitations of AI systems. And we talked about, it seems like the solution to all of this is basically educating people on what AI systems are, conducting research into how different practices affect the product. So to me, because I'm coming from education background, I immediately think, what can the education sector and higher education institutions do, right? What is their role in raising awareness, preparing people for innovation, things like that?
Look, I mean, it is clear that we need to be educated on AI system. Given the fact that now we can get somebody to computer system to generate text, what really do we want? What skills do we want a person to have out of an education system? Is number one, the ability to ask the right questions. The second skill you are supposed to have is the ability to verify what it tells you. And the verification process has levels. The easiest things to verify are numbers. You know, if somebody is 21 and it says the person is 81, it's much easier to verify.
And it goes back to the things that we already talk about a lot, like critical thinking, right? The ability to ask questions, frame questions in a correct way, and the ability to verify information. It still goes to these basic things that we want to, in terms of our learning outcomes, right? And you mentioned that a regular person probably doesn't have, between their work and everyday life, they don't have time to be an expert in everything and verify every single piece of information they get. And that is why research institutions are so important. That's why education institutions are so important, because they kind of do this work for a regular person, right? Making sure that these systems are functioning in a way that we want them to function. So it seems to me that the collaboration between different stakeholders, like researchers and government and civil society organization, is the answer to creating AI systems that are beneficial to society. So how do you think these different stakeholders can cooperate in an effective way to ensure this?
Well, I mean, they need to get along. They need to create platforms where they can come together and discuss the issues. We can bridge it by creating a multidisciplinary curriculum so that at least you have an individual. They are not an expert in linguistics, but they are able to recognize their limitations very, very quickly. And they can be able to go and consult somebody who actually will be able to augment those limitations. As UNU, we think AI must be governed. But we understand that governance must happen at all levels. It must happen at the company level, industry level. It must happen at the nation state level. I don't think prescribing that AI outcomes must have probability distribution so that we can know how confident they are must become a law of a country. At best, it can be, you can have some guidelines. I don't even think that should be governed from an international level. But I think we should govern cross-border data flow from an international level, because cross-border data flow means different countries must agree on some form of a protocol. So you need to balance international versus national. You need to balance self-governance by industry versus government-led. We need to balance security versus transparency. And so those are very, very important issues.
So UNU, as an educational institution within the UN system, is sort of placed in this unique position to facilitate conversations and
To facilitate conversation,
collaboration.
to teach about the values of AI, to help formulate policies and regulations, to advise, to train policymakers to be able to go to their own countries and craft policies that actually work, to work together with the ITU, International Telecommunication Union, to establish standards that are needed, to help with the implementation of the Pact of the Future that recommends scientific panel on AI, to galvanize all voices so that we can be able to create the AI governance system that works for the greater amount of people.
Let me add one more. To have these kind of conversations that we had today at our podcast, so that people who do not work in the AI field or who do not have a digital tech background can be a part of these important conversations and understand their role in transforming our future in meaningful, equitable ways.
Yeah.
Right on again. And before we wrap up, there is a segment that we do with all of our guests, and we ask them speed round, rapid fire questions. If you could provide short answers, I'll give you 3 questions. Your thoughts will be appreciated. So, number 1, what's your favorite statistic or fact related to AI, and why does it stand out to you?
Well, I think the fact that is my favorite is that AI is not the answer to everything.
These are very important words that we need to kind of internalize. Question number 2. If you could describe AI in 3 words, what would they be?
Data, algorithms, and computing.
Oh, nice and concise. And last question, are AI systems inherently biased?
Yes, they are inherently biased.
Thank you very much. And actually, I think you extensively talked about why they're inherently biased and what we can do about it. Thank you very much for your participation in this episode.
Excellent.
I'm curious about how AI will answer this question. Let's hear ChatGPT's take on this.
AI systems are not inherently biased, but they can reflect and amplify biases present in the data they are trained on or the decisions made during their design. These biases may stem from historical inequalities, cultural norms, or imbalances in data representation. For example, if training data predominantly represents one demographic, the AI may perform poorly for others. Bias can also arise from the priorities and assumptions of developers or organizations deploying the system. Addressing these issues requires careful data curation, transparent design processes, and ongoing testing to mitigate unintended consequences.
Okay, it's a pretty fascinating difference in perspective, and definitely a conversation worth continuing as AI evolves. And that's a wrap on this episode of AI and Sustainability. A huge thank you to Professor Marwala for joining us today. If this episode sparked your circuit, so to speak, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world of artificial intelligence and sustainability. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a sustainability advocate, or just curious about where the future is headed, we've got more thought-provoking topics and exciting guests coming your way. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.